First of all, welcome. And for the faces that have heard this presentation before, I'm thankful that you're patient to hear it again, because you will probably hear it once again, because we're going to be talking this up until April of 2018, basically, when our report is due. Basically, what I'm going to talk about is the affirmatively furthering fair housing assessment that we as the city and the consortia with Council Bluffs and some other partners, including the City of Bellevue, the PHA in Bellevue, OHA, Douglas County PHA, and Metro Housing Agency in Council Bluffs. We're all in partnership to do what's called the AFFH, that's what we call it short, assessment. It is a requirement that all cities and entities that receive federal funds, it's required by HUD to complete this assessment. And it's basically providing us an opportunity for a community voice that we may or may not have exercised in the past. It's a real opportunity for you to have comments, for you to voice your opinions about what you have seen and what you have experienced, and what your clients or your personal friends, family, or associates have also experienced in the realm of disparities and access to opportunities. And that's really what the AFFH is about. It's about the disparities of access to opportunities for people in what's called the protected classes. I don't know, do we know how to go?
I needed to, sorry.
Okay, that's okay, because I can fill it in. So we are in an opportunity where your voice can be heard, and we do have a history of doing this kind of thing. We have done what's called the analysis of impediments in the past, and that's when we had to take a look at basically the same kinds of things. What are those disparities that people in protected classes are experiencing? Setting goals and strategies, and then having to be accountable for those goals and strategies. We've had to do that for the last 10 years. We are still accountable for that in our consolidated plan and our action plan. There was goals and strategies set that we still are working on. There was another effort that was done called the Fair Housing Equity Assessment that was done in 2015. It was funded and approved by HUD. It was conducted by MAPA. You may or may not have heard it through the Heartland 2050 effort. But they also looked at the same kind of things across the board, disparities in access to opportunity. It had some gaps. I don't know what HUD was thinking, but we're kind of doing the same effort, but it's yet different. So we've got stakeholder groups that are also working on goals and strategies as a result of that study as well. So there's a lot going on. It's kind of the buzzword for housing, affirmative marketing. Those are kind of the buzzwords that are now and have been kind of out there for a time now. What we're looking at here is a historical map of Omaha. And what we want to talk about is this assessment that we have to do is really a regional assessment. It goes across 8 counties. It's not just Omaha. It is a regional assessment. But we are going to focus a lot on Omaha as well. And this is a map of Omaha, a historical map. And what it's trying to show you is there is a history of why the Fair Housing Act in 1968 came about, why we are now doing what's called the AFFH, why this is a concentrated effort. There was things such as redlining. If you're not familiar with that, that started about in 1930 when they used to outline communities, banks and insurance companies outlined and developed community maps. They decided what was a unharmonious neighborhood or a neighborhood that they did not want to fund, and it was based strictly on race or national origin. They outlined those areas in red ink. And basically what happened is they denied then those areas financial services. That was of course outlawed, but it still exists in very subtle ways. It still exists. It exists such as insurance rates based upon zip codes, loan interest based upon discriminatory kinds of things and zip codes, location of houses, those kinds of things. Those are the subtle ways. It's now called risk management, but it still happens. When we look at lending institutions, we talk about predatory lending. Those kinds of things are still happening. Segregated public housing, blockbusting, if you've not heard that term, that's when real estate agents would go into a neighborhood where a person or family of color would go into a non-minority neighborhood, and they would say to the neighbors, you have now minorities in your community. Your real estate values are likely to decrease. You probably should be selling so you can maintain your value, get the money out of your house. And so basically what you saw was white flight. So that's still happens as well. I witnessed that in the community I was living in, where in 2 years it was a major white flight. So it was still happening. Steering, discriminatory advertising, restricted deeds and covenants, discriminatory lending, which is again predatory lending, zoning restrictions and community opposition, or NIMBY, or not in my neighborhood. And again, that currently exists. So when we look at these things that were basically determined to be illegal, they still exist in some form, maybe a little more subtly, but they still exist. And so as we move forward, these are some of the things that we have to address. There are existing zoning laws, there are existing or non-existing, I can't even think of the word right now. I went blank, had a senior moment, forgive me. There are existing policies and things, or non-existent policies for SIDs, for subdivisions, for the developments, that do not include inclusionary languages or inclusionary policies, so that some of this would not happen. So part of doing this AFFH, we hope to address some of that. We hope to change some policies. We hope to address some of the laws and things that may actually create some of these barriers and disparities. Okay, so the Fair Housing Act, when we talk about the protected classes, these are the protected classes. It's race, color, national origin, religion, disability, familiar status, and sex. For when we do our federal contracts, we also include sexual orientation and gender identity. But for the purposes of this, those can be included under sex as a discriminatory act. So when we talk about disparities in access to opportunity with regard to the FFH, we are talking about these people that are in these protected classes. Okay. The role, again, really what it comes down to is determining and establishing what contributing factors there are that make disparities in access to opportunity. And that's really what we're talking about. When we talk about opportunity, most people think when we talk fair housing, you're talking about housing only. But housing is where we're rooted. But once you go out from housing, it affects all the other parts of our lives. You think about the schools, the education. What motivates you to move into a neighborhood if you have children? You're looking for a good education, a structure for them to go to. You're looking at the transportation. If you need public transportation, is it accessible to you? Does it get you where you need to go? If you have a job across town, can you take a bus or buses in a reasonable way to get to your job and back home? Some of us can't do that. And why not? Do you have housing choice? Can you choose to live where you want to live? Not only because can you afford it, but can you actually, if you afford it, can you go there? And if you can't go there, why not? Is there affordable housing throughout the city where you have housing choice? Or are there places we know we can't go for whatever reason, whether it be for color, whether it be for income, whether it be for anything? So our city does stay segregated, as do a lot of cities across the nation. But these are the things that we're looking at. Do you have housing choice? Can you access the things that you need to access? Are the services available for you? Is there good food? Is there nutritious food available in your community? Is the environment? How does that affect you? Is the environment worse in the community that you live in, or better somewhere else? Would you prefer to live somewhere else but you can't get there or can't move there, and why not? Those are the questions that are being asked through this process, through this assessment. This assessment, we can go to the next slide. Okay. There's a process for this assessment, and this me talking is part of it. Basically, HUD has provided some tables and maps that provides what's called base knowledge. They have an assessment tool that's approximately 90 questions. And we've had to go through that tool and answer those questions based upon the maps and tables provided by HUD. Now, HUD did this study, a national study, and they came up with what they call the base data. From that base data, then, they are requiring that we go to community engagement, and that's you. And all the stakeholder meetings and the special focus meetings that we are required to have. And that is to get what's called local knowledge. Because if the HUD maps and tables are not accurate, we need to know what is accurate. What is the true story? What's the true reflection of Omaha or our region? Because those maps may not show it. And in many cases, they do not show the real story or the complete story. So when we have these meetings, And please, I ask if you see, and I will tell you the website to go to, when you see a public meeting or a meeting for a stakeholder or community meeting, please attend. You'll be able to see the maps. We'll talk more about them. You'll be able to have more input into them. We really need you to participate in this process. We need your businesses to participate. We need your friends, family, and neighbors to participate. We need your voices so that we can have an accurate reflection of what Omaha is, so we can have some realistic goals and strategies to address some of these disparities. After we get your input, we then have to take it, we have to analyze it, and we have to put it in a document. That document then is presented to the mayor, it's also presented to the council, and it's also presented to you for your approval before we give it to HUD. It is due to HUD April 2018. So it's still a very long process. We are now in the process of having stakeholder meetings, community meetings, individual meetings, and small focus group meetings. So there's a lot of opportunities for you to have a voice where we can get down to the nitty-gritty. You can tell your story, you can tell your client's story, you can tell us what you have experienced and what, or someone you know has experienced. There's opportunities for that night, and I please ask you to please participate when that opportunity comes. We have to then look at your comments, we have to look at the base data, and we have to prioritize based upon what you say, what some of those contributing factors are. There's going to be a long list of them, but we have to prioritize which ones stand out, which ones are more consistent, and that's what the goals and strategies will be based on. When we come back to you with this document, that's what you're going to look for. Were your comments taken into view? Are our goals and strategies based on what you said, what the public, what the community has said? This is not meant for HUD to establish what we do. It's not meant for the planning department or our partners to establish that either. It's for you to establish what the priorities are in our communities that we need to address in a realistic way. Once we set the priorities, once we set the goals and the strategies, we are then held accountable. This all has to be included in the consolidated plan, it has to be included in the action plan, and it should be considered in all city long-term planning documents and that kind of thing. So we're hoping that it goes beyond just the HUD requirement, and as the development community sits down, as the nonprofits sit down and they start developing their programs and start doing their housing and do whatever they're doing, that they will look at this document, that they will see what those priorities are, what the goals are, and they will take all that into account so that we can start creating a more inclusive community, because we do have segregated communities here in Omaha. If you come to the meetings and you see the maps, you will see there's a lot of issue. We have, once the document is done, of course then it goes to HUD and then it has to be incorporated. One of the things that we have right now is a survey. If you picked up a brown envelope, inside that envelope is a written survey. You can either do it manually or you can go onto the website. I think it's the next site, okay, we can go past this. Okay, I've already talked about that.
Okay.
Boy, I'm just talking, okay, this is it. This is the website. You can go to this website. The survey is on that website. If you have clients or friends that need an additional language, there is a Google Translator on that website. Please go on there and take the survey. It's not that complicated. It's not that long. It probably will take you 8 to 10 minutes to fill it out. It's really important that we get the word out, that we get everyone to do this survey. It's one of the tools in addition to the meetings and the talks and everything else that we're doing to try and get people's views, to get their stories, to get their opinions. We're encouraging everyone to please take the survey. If you prefer to take it in the hard copy, you have that in your envelope. You can do it and hand it to, well, leave it on the table or hand it to Jim before you leave tonight. If you want to take it with you and make copies for friends and family, I encourage you to do that as well. I also brought a whole bunch of them. If you want to take a stack of them, I'll leave them out on the back table. In your packet, you will also see a little piece of paper that basically has this slide on it. What you want to do is pass that around. It is the website that people can go to take the survey on the website. That is the AFFH website. It will stay current with events. There's a calendar that tells you where the meetings are and what they are. There is a comment section that we will be downloading the information that we're getting from these meetings so that you can kind of see what we're hearing. You can access the tables and the maps and things that HUD has provided through a link there. So that is our active site. If you want to keep up with us with regard to the AFFH, that's where you want to go, because we're working real hard to keep you informed about how this process is going. It's a long process. It's a busy process. We encourage you to be part of it. We don't want to be the ones to make the decision. I think it should be reflective of the community that we serve. Again, we have to do a regional study, so we are looking at outlying areas, but they have different issues than we do. They not less, but different, and they will be considered. Bellevue has their own issues. Council Bluffs have theirs. Questions are asked like, why do minorities not move to Bellevue? If you're not in the military, why do you not move to Bellevue? Why do refugees not move to Bellevue? Why do we not have a lot of people of color in Council Bluffs? If they do, they're right along the river and they live in rental housing. Why is that? The largest minority population in Council Bluffs is Hispanic. Why is that? Why don't anybody else go over there? So those are the questions. What's keeping people from housing choice? What's keeping people from thinking they have access to those areas? Could be good, it could be bad, but those are the things we're looking at to see what's in place that's keeping people from accessing opportunities where they exist. Yes. Yes, I'm sorry.
First of all, my response is not to you, it's to the city.
Okay.
I'm glad that it opened up identifying the map that was identified as being historical. I'm glad that you identified historical apparatuses that have purposely negated and discriminated against a population. Over the last 45 years, we have monitored CBGB grants, 70s, 80s, 90s. We have seen the city purposely neglect neighborhood organizations, principally through the latter part of the 90s up until maybe 2010. One of the difficulties that the traditional North Omaha community has that is different from the South Omaha community, that the population has dwindled and the age demographics are averaging somewhere around 50s. So when you start talking about making things right, the system is already in place not to make it right for those who have suffered from it in the past. What it's going to do, like you spoke about redlining and a credit rating and the banks doing the community reinvestment programs. All of a sudden now, individuals who come to this country with no credit are identified as being more worthy than those who have suffered and have had bad credit. The most important piece is what you started off with when the lady asked about how are you going to get this information when the majority of our population are digitally ignorant. Your communication information to the African American, to the North Omaha community has been non-existent. So now that you're talking about developing downtown, not for the community's effort, but for the downtown central Omaha's betterment, everything is okay, i.e. your land banking. Your land banking is not geared for the traditional population. It's there because they do not qualify. 75% of the people that would ordinarily benefit from land banking will not qualify because of historical problems. Now you're talking about making everything all right and using neighborhood organization and putting in place stakeholders who have always been in place as far as HUD's concerned, but the city has had at least 20 years of total neglect of neighborhood organizations as it applies to the North Omaha community. There's something seriously wrong with just not paying any attention to that historical deficit that is there and thinking that all we have to do now is just go by the rules and play the game, when it has already devastated that community. That community does not even qualify for the majority of the types of programs that you're talking about introducing. And here again, I'll say the land banking and the home development. This city has been challenged about the Community Reinvestment Act, trying to make the banks do something, and you even passed it off to the Chamber of Commerce. and they put a big, huge task force together to put that piece together, and nothing happened. There's been no development within the North Omaha community in the last 35 years. And now you're talking about coming in and doing something when the majority of that population has been dissipated to other parts of the city because of the moving of the housing authorities and Section 8s and all of that. So you're talking about putting it together for a whole nother different group of people that have not that historical deficit that you recognized in the first part of your presentation.